this book talks about this guy that worked in a plant, and he had a lot of constraints. And then he started as someone who was working in a company with a lot of difficulties. And then it changed a lot, and he started improving the process, the business, and he made more profits. I want to do this also in my company. As I told you, we have a business of education here, and we also have a financial advisory business here. What is the starting process to look at my company and make it more profitable?
So the theory of constraint, the main principle of the theory, which my father called inherent simplicity. Inherent simplicity. Mm-hmm. Inherent means it's embedded inside. Simplicity is the opposite of complexity. Mm-hmm. And inherent simplicity basically means that even though on the surface level we see very high degree of complexity, a lot of different elements and factors that impact, interact with each other. You touch one side of the system, it has effects elsewhere. Mm-hmm. If you really take the time to look at the system as a whole and understand the cause and effect that governs the flow of the system, you will be able to find very few constraints. Identify few constraints. There are many difficulties, many obstacles that you need to overcome, but few constraints. Constraint is the focal point, the one thing you need to focus on, that if you are able to manage it better, the entire system will make more throughput. Throughput is like goal units that you generate more. Mm-hmm. So first you need to understand what is throughput. Let's take your education business. What is throughput? What does it mean? What do you want to achieve more? Is your education about achieving more profit on its own, or is it about achieving more audience that would appreciate to learn more about your services and about the knowledge you provide? You need to understand, to be very clear about what is the throughput that you want to generate.
Okay, so the idea of the throughput is to know exactly what you want to achieve.
Correct. What is that you need more of that will be considered success for your business?
And do you think it's hard to know what we want more of? Actually, when you talk to the business, usually they don't know what they want more.
I think that it's not so difficult. If you want to really precisely verbalize it, then it becomes a little bit more tricky. Different people have different opinions about the words, or they're more picky. But like most businesses out there, a business is set honestly to make more profit. So the goal is to make profit. Of course, not just in the short term, but to make profit now as well as in the future, which for this reason you need to keep customers happy and employees happy, of course. It's not at their expense, but it's about making profit. But when you talk about education, when you have several businesses that feeding each other, this is where we really need to understand what it is that we want more of. And the immediate next question will be, okay, so where is your constraint? Where is the focal point that really dictates your ability today to get more of this goal? Because there are many difficulties, but it doesn't mean that if you overcome each one of these difficulties, immediately you will make more throughput. But the constraint is your weak link, or the point that really dictates your ability to achieve more of your goal. Is it in producing more content? Is it in getting more subscribers? Is it in getting more conversion of subscribers to paying subscribers? We need to understand where is this constraint, the focal point that we need to really put our attention on. Focus. TOC is all about focus. Focus our attention in order to think how we better manage this constraint. So I will need to ask you.
Okay, so we kind of start from 2 points. The first one is having a crystal clear vision of the throughput, the thing you want to achieve more.
Correct.
And after knowing exactly where you are going, you must think about what's on the way that is not allowing you to reach there.
Correct. That is controlling your ability to get more of this throughput.
Okay. So,
and it's not many things. It's a few things or one thing.
But you mean there are a few things, or we have a few things that are very important in terms of constraints?
The way to think about it is to say a constraint is a certain resource, I would say, that if you have more of it, if you are able to manage it so you can get more work through it, you'll get immediately more throughput.
Can you give us an example?
Of course. So maybe I'll start with the manufacturing, what the goal is about, right? Production. So let's take a company that make I don't know, just a recent company we work with, they make boilers, but sophisticated boilers. It's a B2B company, that these boilers can go eventually to become part of a nuclear facility or a refinery or like sophisticated facilities. So it starts, of course, with buying raw material and then, shaping the steel, etc., to create the body of the boiler and getting all the other parts that goes into it and the electricity systems, etc. And then there is a section in the process that is the welding section that needs to weld it all together. And then after it, there is something called surface treatment that needs to make sure everything runs together, etc. And you then have a finished product. When you look at this, I made it very simplistic, but you understand what I mean. So then when you look at the flow in this system, you saw very quickly that the welding department was the major constraint for the business because that's where work got stuck. That's where you saw a lot of work in process piling up in front of it, okay? And then it was very apparent that if you can get more through the welding, you will get eventually much more products out the door. Okay, now the question is, how do you do that? And how do you do that in TLC, the most fundamental process, which is written in the book, the goal is called the 5 focusing steps. So after you identify the constraint, the second step is to decide how to exploit it. Which means how the system should be managed to get the most out of the constraint. Okay? And then in the case of welding, it was quite apparent in this example because we saw that there is a lot of time that the welders are not welding because they were busy bringing all the stuff together and setting up the equipment. And a lot of the time, all the parts that needs to be welded together were not there available. So you had to stop the job and wait and look for the other parts that are not available and bring them together. So even though it's the constraint was idle, honestly, from time to time. Another thing we saw in this case, that there was a lot of rework. So they thought they completed the welding job and they moved it forward. But when it reached quality control, for example, they said, no, the job is not done correctly or not done to spec. So you need to redo it. In theory of constraints, when we deal with, let's say, manufacturing or engineering work, after you found the constraint and you think how you get the most out of it, if you see that there is a lot of rework that the constraint is working on, we treat it like a crime. Because if the constraint is, you have a real bottleneck. So every hour you lose on this bottleneck is an hour of throughput that you lose. So if you do rework, what does it mean? It means that your constraint work on something and it reached all the way to the end, and then it's not the right thing. It needs to redo it. Think of the waste and the waste is a waste of throughput, not money, not the cost. It's tremendous. So exploit is the second step. The third step is subordinate everything else to the above decision. In other words, make sure that all the other sections in your organization or operations are aligned to enable you to get the most from your constraint. And the fourth step is elevate. Elevate the constraint means add more capacity. I'll use a simple terminology. You first squeeze the lemon and make sure you get the maximum juice from the lemon before you buy more lemons. Because you want to make sure that every money you invest in buying another lemon will give you the most throughput. So first exploit before elevate. Just to finish, the fifth step is beware of inertia. The constraint can move. So you always need to make sure and understand what will be your next constraint. So you can prepare yourself to deal with it.
Tá pensando em mudar de profissão ou ter uma profissão nova, começar a trabalhar? Já pensou em trabalhar no mercado financeiro? Já pensou em trabalhar com liberdade geográfica, poder trabalhar de onde você quiser? Ou também já pensou em fazer um salário empilhável que ano a ano você vai ganhando mais? Então eu vou te apresentar aqui a formação de consultores de elite da Portfel. Essa é a formação que vai te pegar do básico e levar ao avançado para entregar tudo o que você precisa para fazer parte do time dos melhores consultores financeiros do Brasil. Mesmo se você ainda estiver dando seus primeiros passos nesse mundo, tá bom? Olha só o que você vai ter. Bootcamp presencial. É um evento presencial que vai te transformar em uma verdadeira máquina de captação de clientes. Você vai ter um treinamento com o Thiago Nigro e com os melhores vendedores do Grupo Primo. É uma experiência inédita no mercado financeiro, tá? Encontro com os sócios do Grupo Primo. Você terá 6 encontros online com diferentes sócios do Grupo Primo. Em cada um dos encontros, você vai masterizar uma habilidade essencial para o seu sucesso como consultor. Você terá calls quinzenais com os analistas da casa de análise que mais cresce no Brasil. Serão conversas e informações de bastidores que só um profissional de investimentos tem acesso, tá? Sinta-se privilegiado, pois um consultor de elite merece uma equipe de análise de elite também. Treinamento de comunicação. Você saberá exatamente o que fazer e como fazer para que seus clientes enxerguem você como um profissional de elite. Tudo isso pela mesma equipe que faz os maiores influenciadores de finanças do país chegarem aonde estão. Conversas com gestores. Nós te daremos acesso a conversas exclusivas com grandes gestores de fundos de investimentos no Brasil. Pouquíssimos profissionais no mercado têm esse tipo de abertura com os gestores, mas nós te colocaremos para aprender com os melhores. Nada mais valioso para um profissional de investimento do que estar por dentro de aspectos qualitativos dos fundos. Oportunidade para atuar na Portfel. Após completar a formação, você agenda a sua avaliação para começar a sua carreira na Portfel aqui no Grupo Primo, a maior e melhor consultoria de investimentos do Brasil. Esse será o início da fase mais promissora da sua vida, eu tenho certeza. Acompanhamento com consultores de elite. Nós vamos te entregar o que nenhuma outra formação te entrega: mentores que já são consultores de elite para te ajudar a avançar mais rápido. Esses consultores já possuem sucesso na carreira de consultoria, sabem como chegar lá e vão te pegar pela mão para que você avance anos em questão de meses. E o melhor de tudo, você pode ter seu dinheiro de volta. Todos que captarem 10 milhões de reais nos primeiros 12 meses como consultor terão 100% do seu dinheiro de volta. 100% dos consultores que atingiram 10 milhões no último ano conseguiram em menos de 12 meses. Então você também pode conseguir, beleza? Quiser saber mais, quer se tornar aqui um consultor de elite, quer trabalhar na Portfel, quer ganhar dinheiro no mercado financeiro, ajudando as outras pessoas a enriquecer, link na descrição, QR Code na tela, faça a sua inscrição.